Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going on a journey into Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. Published in 1890, it explores art, beauty, morality, and, consequences. You might have heard of it, maybe even read it. But get ready for some hidden gems and some fresh perspectives.
It's amazing how relevant this novel still is, even though it was written over a century ago. Like, Wilde could see the future. He saw our obsession with youth and image.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the story starts with Basil Hallward, an artist who becomes obsessed with Dorian Gray's beauty. I mean, we've all been captivated by someone's looks at some point, right?
But Basil,
Takes it to another level.
he does. He sees something special in Dorian, a kind of purity, a perfection. It inspires him to paint a masterpiece, a portrait of Dorian. It captures Dorian's likeness, but also something deeper. It's like he captures Dorian's soul.
And then we have Lord Henry Wotton, a character who's all about pleasure and living life on his own terms. What's your take on his influence on Dorian?
Lord Henry's like that friend. You know, the one who says, skip the gym. Let's eat cake. He's witty. He's charming. But his philosophy is all about booth and beauty, pursuing pleasure above everything else. He plants these ideas in Dorian's head. It's like a seed of vanity and self-obsession.
And that seed grows into an obsession. Dorian, under Lord Henry's influence, makes a wish that changes everything. He wants the portrait to age instead of him.
The ultimate Faustian bargain, eternal youth and beauty, no matter the cost. The portrait becomes a symbol. It shows Dorian's sins and the consequences of his actions.
So how does all this play out? We know Dorian gets involved with Sybil Vane,
Yeah.
a young actress. What's the story there?
At first, Sybil represents purity and goodness. She's beauty and innocence, and Dorian's captivated by her talent. He even proposes. But Lord Henry's always there, whispering doubts, encouraging Dorian to see Sybil differently, as just another object of his affection.
He can't escape that cynical voice. What happens next?
Well, one night, Sybil gives a terrible performance. She's overwhelmed with love for Dorian, and she can't focus on acting. Dorian, caught up in his superficial ideals, is disgusted by her performance.
Oh, wow, so he dumps her.
He does, and he's cruel about it. He tells her that he only loved her beauty, and that now, without her talent, she's nothing to him. Sybil, heartbroken, takes her own life.
That's tragic. So what impact does this have on Dorian?
This is where it gets interesting. Dorian's wish comes true. The portrait, hidden in the attic, now shows a hint of cruelty, a sneer around the lips. But Dorian himself remains physically unchanged.
So the portrait reflects his actions.
Exactly. A visual representation of his soul, a mirror reflecting his moral decline. And this is just the beginning. As Dorian continues his life of pleasure and vice, the portrait will keep transforming, while Dorian stays young and beautiful.
The portrait's like a secret diary,
Yeah.
but with images instead of words, revealing Dorian's hidden sins. Pretty creepy. I wouldn't want that in my attic.
A powerful symbol, for sure, a constant reminder of his actions, even while the world sees him as this charming, ageless gentleman. Makes you wonder about people, what secrets they're hiding.
Right. I'm curious about the portrait itself. You said it only changes a little at first. How does it change as Dorian gets worse?
The transformation's gradual, but it doesn't stop. As Dorian does more and more bad things, the portrait reflects that decay. The beautiful face becomes twisted, grotesque even. The eyes are filled with cruelty, a horrifying representation of his soul.
Wow, that's intense. But Dorian himself stays beautiful.
Yes, that's the point of his wish. His true self, his soul, is revealed in all its ugliness on the canvas. But his appearance stays perfect. It's a contrast, appearance versus reality.
Yeah, it makes you think about how we judge people based on looks without knowing what's inside. So how does Dorian react to the changes in the portrait?
He gets obsessed with it. He hides it away, locks it in a room, but he can't stay away. He looks at it, even though it terrifies him. He's fascinated too, like a moth to a flame.
Drawn to and repelled by it at the same time. Does anyone else see it?
Well, that brings us to Basil Hallward, the artist who painted the portrait. Years go by, and Dorian's life is surrounded by rumors, whispers of scandals. Basil cares about Dorian, and he's worried about the path Dorian's on. He confronts Dorian, talks about the rumors, urges him to change his lifestyle.
And what does Dorian do? Does he listen to Basil?
No, not at all. He's terrified of being exposed. His whole life is built on this facade, beauty and innocence, and he'll protect it at any cost. He panics, and he makes the decision. He shows Basil the portrait, the grotesque, aged image of his true self.
Whoa, that's a bold move. What did Basil think?
Horrifying for Basil. He sees Dorian has become the corruption under the surface, Dorian panics again. Fear takes over. He wants to silence Basil, and he does something terrible. He murders Basil.
Wow. He kills the one person who cared about him, who tried to help him. So does he finally face the consequences?
You'd think so. But no. He escapes accountability again. He blackmails someone to get rid of the body, erases the evidence. He keeps living his double life. Charming on the outside, consumed by guilt and fear on the inside.
The more he tries to bury his past,
Mm-hmm.
the more it haunts him. What about Lord Henry? What's his role now?
He's still there, but his influence fades. Dorian has gone too far. Even Lord Henry's cynicism can't justify it anymore. They grow apart. It's like Dorian realizes he can't blame Lord Henry for everything.
Sounds lonely. Surrounded by people, but alone with his secret. And that portrait. So, in the end, what happens to Dorian?
The ending is tragic, but inevitable. Dorian, filled with guilt, haunted by what he's done, fixates on the portrait. He sees it as the source of his pain, the symbol of his corrupted soul. He wants to escape his past, so he makes a desperate, crazy decision. He decides to destroy the portrait.
Destroy the evidence. But it's a part of him, right? What happens?
The portrait is a symbol of his soul, and trying to destroy your soul. Well,
It destroys him.
exactly. He attacks the portrait, and he dies. But here's the twist. His servants find him, aged, withered, showing all the marks of his corruption. The portrait, though, goes back to its original beauty, the innocent young man Dorian once was.
Wow, powerful ending. His true self is revealed, but only after death. It shows you can't escape who you are. What do you think Wilde was trying to say?
It's open to interpretation, of course, but to me it says actions have consequences. Even if they're hidden, we can't escape who we are, and the truth always comes out.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we can't just hide our bad deeds and pretend they didn't happen. But there's more to it than that. It's not just about punishment. What about this idea of beauty being a double-edged sword? How do you see that in this story?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most interesting parts, for sure. Wilde seems to be saying that beauty can be a blessing and a curse. It can open doors, captivate people, but it can also be a trap, a source of vanity, shallowness even. Dorian gets so focused on his own beauty that he forgets what really matters. Compassion, empathy, real connection.
He treats people like objects,
Yeah.
just there to admire him.
Exactly. He even says that he loves things more than people because things never change. It shows how obsessed he is with beauty. It's turned him cold and heartless.
Like with Sybil Vane. He's attracted to her beauty and talent. But when she's vulnerable, when she doesn't live up to his ideal image, he just throws her away. It's like he can't see past the surface.
It reminds us that true beauty isn't about how you look. It's about what makes us human. Love, compassion, growth.
Do you think Dorian could have escaped this? Could he have been redeemed?
That's a great question, and I think Wilde leaves it open for us to decide. There are times when Dorian sees how awful his actions are. There's a hint of remorse. But he's so afraid. He needs to protect his secret, so he never really confronts his darkness.
Trapped in a gilded cage, he has it all. Youth, beauty, wealth. But at a terrible price.
And it's not enough, he realizes too late, that true happiness comes from being authentic and experiencing everything life has to offer, the good and the bad.
So many big questions about choices and values.
Yeah.
What are your final thoughts for our listeners? What should they think about after this deep dive?
I think the main takeaway is real beauty isn't just skin deep. It's about character, compassion, the courage to be yourself. Even with your flaws, pleasure and beauty are important. But they shouldn't come at the cost of our morals, our empathy.
I agree. Especially today, we're surrounded by images of perfection, always chasing external validation.
Dorian Gray reminds us to look deeper, to focus on what really matters: integrity, kindness, and acceptance of ourselves, even our imperfections.
Well said. That's our deep dive into The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Uh-huh.
We hope you enjoyed exploring this fascinating novel with us. And remember, next time you see someone beautiful, remember to appreciate the beauty within, too. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.